Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And I am very excited today to be joined by Ricky and Courtney from Team Mammoth.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Wonderful. Mammoth has been competing on BattleBots for 3 seasons at this point. Obviously, last year didn't go the way that you wanted, but you had an amazing 2020. So we're definitely going to talk about all of that and kind of how things are going to be moving forward for Mammoth. So I really want to kind of shift and, go back to 2020 before anything else. That was a season that you beat Huge, Hypershock, and Copperhead.
Well, we didn't beat Hypershock, but we wish we had.
Oh, didn't you?
No, we got
They lit our batteries on fire.
yeah,
Big time.
we were very much on fire, and they very much weren't.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, still like it was a really good season.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that year? Given that it was your second season, that's like, a pretty good showing.
Yeah, I think that season went just about how we hoped it would, and we hope it gets better every season, year and year, year after year. That season, just a ton of things went right, and we really had Mammoth doing everything that we wanted Mammoth to do. We were really pleased with it. And it was the second year in a row. I mean, the first year we were there for a rookie team we checked all the boxes we wanted to check. And then coming back a second year after that, we really checked all the boxes we wanted to check, and then some. And none of us really knew how Mammoth was going to perform in the arena that year. So after coming out of the box, or I should say, going into the box for the first fight with Huge, and none of us, we knew it would be jumping all over the place, but we had no idea it was going to be flipping around the way it did. And, it was just pleasant surprise after pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And I mean, Mammoth is such a unique robot. I mean, I'm sure that you hear that a lot, obviously, but it's so interesting to me because I hear a lot of people talk about it with the vertical spinners, and some people talk about it with the flippers. But I mean, it's really kind of both. So I think that's kind of a unique problem for other teams to have to strategize against and figure out what they're going to do. Was that kind of your intention when you designed the robot to make something that people really have to think about?
I think there were a lot of things that went into why that robot, the original design when I built the little 12 and 30-pound versions was a neat idea, and why we thought it had some legs behind it, or legs on it. And the fact that people don't know how to fight it is definitely a big strength in our corner.
Yeah, we're weird. People don't know how to get around us. People are like, it's really big and kind of awkward. And before we fight a lot of teams, we're kind of like bump into each other in the pits, and it's like people are always like, we're excited to fight you, but we're also confused about how to go about this because it's just weird, but in a really good way.
Yeah. Huge came up to us in the 2020 season, and they were like, really know how everyone else feels now. So
do you think though, because I'm sure that the two robots get compared a lot, but they're very different in a lot of ways. I mean, like in what ways, obviously size, they're very similar, but in what ways do you think are they the most different if you really are comparing the two robots?
Well, it's kind of funny because Huge took a very normal approach to damaging other robots. They've got a vertical spinner on there that's similar to, well, it's a little different than other vertical spinners, but it's still a big bar moving fast, trying to hit people. Where the weapon differentiates itself a little bit is that it can come down and hit the top of robots or the sides in places that maybe aren't all that well armored. But really, Huge is novel because of its drive system. I mean, it's got giant wheels. It's hard to hit things on it. That's where it's different. We're kind of the opposite. I mean, we've got go-kart tires that are similar to a lot of other robots. We've got bits and bobs down below that are hittable, maybe not quite as much as the average robot, but there's still stuff to hit there. It's our weapon is very bizarre and different and something other people aren't used to. So they're kind of two sides of the
same coin.
Of the same, yeah, unusual robot coin.
I would say they definitely are. One interesting thing, so like I've watched BattleBots since 2005, very long time fan. You know, I've watched all the seasons, and I don't know how until literally last week I was watching one of the previous fights that Mammoth had fought in, and I was like, Mammoth has eyes. I literally never noticed that because, and I think it's just because there's so much to look at on the robot and you're not focusing on that part. Just because I had a brief conversation when I was talking with Boltergeist team about this. Robots that have eyes have personality. And I think that that's fantastic. I mean, so, you know, obviously on a robot like Tantrum, for example, that stands out. You notice that, but it's very subtle on Mammoth, and I just think that's kind of a cool feature.
Mammoth is definitely taking on a personality more and more each year, as far as what how it's been anthropomorphized and that sort of thing. There's a great artist who goes around doing sketches of what all the robots would look like as people and that sort of thing. And we got a couple different years of that person going and doing art for Mammoth that was really neat. And it's funny you mentioned the eyeball thing, because originally that eyeball was what we were thinking of as the logo for the robot and team, and it didn't jump out to a whole lot of people. You know, now we've got that little cartoon mammoth that's on our shirts and that sort of thing, and stickers, and the word mammoth in the font that we have. But originally we thought, oh, the eyeball will be super identifiable. But you're right, there's so much to look at when you're looking at that robot. You get distracted. Plus, I always thought the spinning eyeball was a neat effect because it spins whenever the weapon's going. But if you stop it and it's upside down, it's kind of strange, and maybe
it's spinning relatively fast, so you don't notice it.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of love and care went into designing that eyeball the first season. We were like hyper focused on making the eye perfect, and you know, because it's bloodshot, so it's like, where is this line gonna go? And we definitely we honed in on that eyeball the first year.
Yeah, we had like a real graphic design person working with us, and I don't know how many revisions we went through. But, yeah, we're glad you notice it now.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Well, and that, like, and I think maybe it's going through rewatches, you know, because when you watch a match for the first time, I think sometimes you're so focused on what's happening that you don't notice all of these little details. You know, because I also noticed that when Mammoth had flipped over, I saw the "oh no, not again."
Yeah.
So just little details like that, I think, are so fun.
Yeah, we try to put them in. TV sometimes picks up on them, sometimes they don't. But there are a good number of those little things hidden in there. There's a couple others, you know, keen watchers at home might be able to pick up on if they go back and watch. So
little Easter eggs, mammoth eggs.
Mammoth eggs.
Yeah, mammoth eggs. That's perfect. So let's kind of go through last season, which started off on a real high. You know, you came out first match, beat Hijinks. You know, the match did start off a little bit like you were just kind of both, you know, trying to go at each other. And you know, I don't know if it was intentional, and maybe you could kind of elaborate on that, but it looked like you kind of used that corner next to the upper deck to, you know, kind of get them, and then got them up in the air, and one of their wheels came off, and that was kind of all that it was done. And you seemed so excited about that win. Was it just, you know, it was the first match of the season and you were just excited to go out, like, you know, with a high there?
I think it was a combination of things. It was a really tough preseason for us, getting the robot ready and everything. I mean, it was a really strenuous build between still having to deal and even now, still having to deal with a lot of COVID procedures and things, and still no longer building in some of the spaces that we've been able to build in before, so having different shop space. No air conditioning in the summer in Maryland in a workshop by the bay is not a lot of fun. So
It's
that
toasty.
Yeah, toasty, and the tide goes out and doesn't smell all that great if you're happen to be working in the industrial part of town, which we were.
Baltimore problems.
Yeah, so it was just all strenuous and hard, and there was a lot of stuff on the robot that was unproven, and we had got to test as much as we wanted. So having things come together and for a win, first off, that alone just made it all worth it. And there's been a lot of each year there's been a couple of moments that those moments alone made the rest of the year worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely one of the two, I think, for the 2021 season. The other half of why that was so gratifying was that Mammoth was originally designed to fight horizontal spinners. That was a big design goal for us. And of course, I decided to go the first year we were there and say, give us lots of horizontal spinners, give us whoever you can, give us Tombstone. And then they went on to do that. We got a ton of horizontal spinners this year. But seeing Mammoth flip a horizontal spinner, have the horizontal spinner's weapon catch on the floor, and then having the horizontal spinner go flying off in some direction and hurt itself is, like, on paper exactly what Mammoth was designed to do. So even if it only happens now and then, it's just really cool having that happen, and you love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, it was a great match. I'm sure that you were feeling really good about things, and like you said, you wanted horizontal spinners. The next match you did end up getting Tombstone, and I'm really curious with some things about that match, because obviously you went at them. Ray hit you hard, which is what Tombstone does. And you both ended up, kind of not moving a whole lot. Now, again, sometimes you see things differently on TV, but I was just curious because they started the countdown, and obviously you were both in kind of the same situation, moving in the same area. But for me, I thought it looked like Mammoth was kind of moving out of that space. I don't know if you consider that controlled or not, but like, what did you think about that? Like, did you think, yes, it definitely should have been a double count out? Or do you think that, like, for you, maybe it should have stopped because you had managed to move out of the space you were in? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Sure. Well, first thing to say is that they cut that a little bit. Well, no shade whatsoever to Tombstone. I think the way things ended up was reasonable and pretty fair. But they did cut that, what I felt was a little more charitable to Tombstone, which is okay. I mean, they've got a TV show to make. What was really frustrating there was that when that initially happened, they counted Mammoth out as a knockout, and then refilmed that whole thing with the double knockout and all that. Which, if that had gone, I would have been furious, and I think the whole team would have been pretty furious, because the way, and again, it comes out a little differently on TV. We both kind of skittered apart from each other after that big hit. Tombstone had broken one of their drive wheels, and they got the front of their robot stuck in a kill saw slot, and they had a either damaged or just kind of unhappy second wheel that was jammed up. So they were completely immobile there. I mean, 100% stuck, smoked a little bit. I think that was just them trying to spin. I don't think they were on fire.
Robots tend to smoke a little bit after a little bit of fighting. It's not that uncommon.
Yeah. We had that whole drive pod wheel section pop out. And once we kind of got free of that, once that was no longer under the robot, we could crab walk and skitter a little bit. And that was towards the end of that countdown.
It was, yeah.
So, I think it would have been fair for them to say, Mammoth got some controlled movement, but it would have been a little bit of a stretch. I think it would have been crazy to say it's a knockout for Tombstone and that's it. But I think the middle ground that they settled on of it's a double KO and it goes to the judge's decision. If it goes to the judge's decision, Tombstone gets it. That's understandable, and away it goes. So it's frustrating because that was that motor assembly should have never popped out. That was a design error that we never caught up on. We fixed it for the rest of the fights. Those never pop out again. But if we'd just done a bolt that was 1/8 of an inch bigger, we would have won that fight and not had any problems at all. But I asked Ray afterwards. I was like, "Are you okay with me saying from now on that Mammoth knocked out Tombstone?" He said, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem." Because we knocked each other out, so I can take that to the grave.
That's true. It counts both ways. So I thought that it was still a really good fight. Mammoth was aggressive. You went right at Tombstone, and that's that's a scary thing to do. So it didn't end up going the way that you probably wanted it to.
It was a good fight. It was an entertaining fight. A double knockout is not a bad thing. I don't think anyone came away from that. We were all excited. I don't think anyone came away from it crying. The only real frustration was like, oh, that's something we could have designed the robot just a little better and not had happen, which would have been nice.
My perspective is fighting Tombstone is a little bit like fighting Mike Tyson, where if Mike Tyson beats you up, you're like, well, it's Mike Tyson, whatever. I did the best I could.
Yeah. I still have some of my teeth. I came out of that better than expected.
I'm alive.
Yeah, you didn't get cut in half, right? So
yeah, we didn't we rolled our robot out afterwards, and we always look it over and see, okay, what's the damage? How bad is it? And no one was like, oh no. We didn't have that moment where you just want to sit down and just maybe have a little cry. We were like, okay, we held in there. Good for us. Go team.
Yeah, that robot, thanks to Matt and Anna working on it, 2 of her teammates, that was good to go again in not the next day, but the day after.
Oh yeah, they crushed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were out there in the Las Vegas heat, cutting, grinding, welding, fixing everything up, and it's tough. Repairing the robot, especially when you're out in Vegas in August.
Yeah, 105, 110 degree heat outside. Dry as the desert because it is the desert. It's a lot.
Just constantly thirsty.
I bet. And then the third match was against Lucky, which I felt that it was interesting because you're fighting a robot named Lucky, and that had to be, watching it, it felt like it was the unluckiest match that you could have had, because just everything that happened was like the worst way possible. Getting flipped is not bad. Mammoth can survive a flip, but watching it and then seeing you get flipped onto the screws with your wheel just hanging out where it was, and then having Lucky flip the wheel off because of being in that position. I was just cringing the whole time for you, because I'm like, this is so sad. There wasn't a whole lot that it looked like you could have done. So I'm just kind of wanting to get your take on what happened in that match, because it was just really unfortunate.
Yeah, it was, and Lucky. Well, first off, Lucky did a great job. So I don't want to say they got lucky in a they didn't earn it kind of way. But
we were unlucky.
We were very unlucky too. And we came a lot closer, we found out later, to disabling them a couple times than we realized we had. Things always kind of go like that. You don't understand how close certain parts of the robot came to failing on your robot or the other robot until you go back and really look. That was another match where the shafts that we used on the wheels to hold the wheels on as axles, that cracked at a stress fracture that we should have seen after the Tombstone fight. And if we had gone in and replaced that properly and caught it, Lucky would have flipped us, and the match would have kept going, and we probably would have won. I think that was a lot of the lessons from a lot of the fights, is just either be better. And of course, it was hard with how much was going on and the venue and all, but be better about going and inspecting literally everything, or be better about designing it so that you know it doesn't have to be inspected after every fight. There was I don't think it made air, but there was an interview or a conversation I had with Chris and Kenny, where we talked about Mammoth. Each year, Mammoth has been 100% new. Even the first year, 2019 Mammoth, was a complete redesign of what we brought to Orlando Maker Faire, and then 2020 was ground up redesign from 2019, and 2021 was ground up redesign from 2020. And each year we've kind of pushed the technical side of things, because that's what a lot of the team likes to do. But there's just, when you do that, there's so much to test and verify and everything else. So we're trying to take an approach where going forward, where we can be a little more confident in the parts choices we have, and stick with things, at least when things aren't critical. When they don't have to change, maybe don't change it for the sake of changing. So
there's definitely the struggle of trying to strike a balance with, okay, well, what should we keep doing? What can we change? What can we make it better? And what's too big of a risk? And what's a big risk but really worth it?
Yeah.
Is there, I'm sure that there is, but I mean, is there that risk of, because obviously, and I've heard this consistently from the builders that I've talked to, you have to keep evolving because the other robots are going to keep evolving, and you kind of have to keep the pace. Do you really have to work on striking that balance between like overthinking and like thinking that you have to do all of this stuff when in some cases you don't have to do that much to change things?
For Mammoth there is, and for a lot of the non-meta robots, that pace has to keep going, because a lot of the robots, especially the non-high kinetic energy ones, are relying on other robots having some Achilles heel that they didn't know about and taking advantage of it, yeah. or beating them into submission until they break. Well, there's not a lot of robots anymore that don't reliably get through a 3-minute match. Mm-hmm. So you can't have any kind of confidence that just getting through the match and being aggressive is going to get you the win, especially with a robot like Mammoth. So we have to keep evolving so that we know our robot is as bulletproof as it can be, so that we have new and interesting ways to take on people. I mean, we talked about having an advantage because none of the other robots have fought us. Well, we've fought half the robots now. That advantage is going away. So if we don't change if we don't change Mammoth a little bit, then sure, maybe they've only fought one Mammoth before instead of 30 vertical spinners, but that advantage slowly evaporates. We had to keep things new and come up with new ideas, and plus that makes the best TV anyway. Yeah,
well, it's also, for instance, season 2, when we fought Huge, we had a special weapon for Huge, and it was made out of the same material as Huge, which is UHMW. And this was like a big special thing for us. And now it's our standard. Like, we love our UHMW weapon and the black one. I can't think of it. Thank you. Yes. Like, those are our standards now. And before, it was our weird one-off novelty weapon. And, well, let's try this material and see if it's good. And it was, it felt like a gamble when we first used that.
Yeah.
And now it's our go-to. It's our gold standard. Until we think of something new.
Yeah. And
because Tegris was new this year too.
Yeah. And we learned a lot about how to use and how not to use Tegris on the robot. So there's, as much as I say we want to stick with what we know, there's things that we only know now because we took a huge gamble on it in the past. And that is what's going to enable interesting and new and cutting edge Mammoth next year. Yeah. And that's, at least for me, and I think for Courtney and mediumly so for the rest of the team, but at least for us, trying something new and doing something different in the battle box is the reason we bring Mammoth. I mean, we could bring a lot of different robots, but trying to do something that's never been done is that's what gets us into the shop in the evening.
Yeah, keeping it weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way. Yeah.
It's really
now,
exciting though.
right, for sure. Yeah. And you know, I want to talk about the tournament match last year, obviously. But before I get into like the actual match, I'm just curious because, you know, from a fan perspective, obviously we don't know all the behind the scenes stuff and all the circumstances, but I like, with you getting into the tournament, was that something where the selection committee ahead of time already had you slotted as the next robot in if somebody wasn't able to make it, or was that like a last minute type of decision?
It's a little bit of both, and the story also differs depending on, you know, who we asked at what time. But the short version of it was we were told that each of the fights had a backup person designated for them. So in our case, with the Glitch and Witch Doctor fight, we were the backup should one of those two robots back out. I don't remember who the other ones were now for what fights and things.
I don't know.
I think Gruff might have been one of the designated backups for another fight. But basically all of those teams that were right on the cusp of being in the tournament, assuming that they said that they were going to be ready to go and have a functional robot and were willing to be in the tournament, because not all of them did, they got assigned a fight to be the backup for it. So we were the backup for Glitch / Witch Doctor, and Glitch unfortunately had problems, and we got drafted into the spot. So we would have loved to see Glitch there. I mean, they really had a pretty marvelous run, and they're a cool robot. We, you know, offered what we could for help, and it wasn't that they didn't have help. I mean, I think half the teams at BattleBots offered some kind of help, but at some point there's just only so much you can do on one robot to get in there.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you know, like from things that I've heard, you know, obviously, like they're a rookie team, and they may not have had the, you know, the knowledge and things like that some of the veteran teams have to be as prepared as possible for whatever could happen. And it's unfortunate, but I mean, it did, you know, give you an opportunity. I mean, if you could have picked a matchup, is Witch Doctor one that you would have been like, yeah, sure, or was it like, no, this is not a good matchup for Mammoth?
Witch Doctor wasn't a bad
I'll fight
matchup.
anyone.
Yeah. She was thrilled.
I love Witch Doctor. I think they're a great team. I was also incredibly stoked that we got to fight Tombstone, and you know, there's less pressure on me than there is for you. You're driving the robot. So I mean, from my perspective, yeah, I'll fight anyone, but that's because I don't have to drive the robot. So
let's see. No, and we apparently, at least I don't know if they were just being polite, but Andrea came up to us later and showed us, I guess, some of the parts we bent, and they were like, yeah, this piece was bent over and was this close to the weapon belt. If it had just hit a little harder, it would have, you know, taken out our weapon, and then, you know, who knows what would have happened. There were other things we learned in that fight. One of the things that was a real downer, we kept having problems with our weapon. So if you'll notice, the first fight against Hydrus, Mammoth's weapon works right the way it's supposed to. All the rest of our fights, I think the Tombstone fight, the weapon also worked the way it was supposed to.
yeah, it was like, I would say 95% there.
Yeah.
You know?
Lucky and Witch Doctor, and then the Bounty Hunters fights, all of those, we were having problems with the weapon, and we used a part designed for Gigabyte, a motor controller used for Gigabyte, which is an awesome motor controller. It just wasn't programmed for what we needed it to do. And it was better than what we had before, which was our weapon getting locked on and with no ability to turn it off after like 6 or 7 hits. But it meant that our weapon was also only operating at like 20% power for the Witch Doctor fight and the Lucky fight. And if we had gone in there, I'm really confident if we'd gone in there with full power on our weapon, we would have beaten Lucky, and we very well could have beaten Witch Doctor. Because we were just, it's Mammoth only works if we're really throwing people, and we couldn't. So
I think that was our biggest issue this season, working through that and trying to find parts that we could use. It honestly, it felt like scavenger hunt.
yeah.
Because at one point Ricky was like, just go and ask people if they have this. There were a couple times where it was like, I'm gonna have to ask people I've never even spoken to before and whose robot is incredible, and be like, hey, do you maybe have something we could use? And Gigabyte was super helpful and super nice. Thankfully, everyone at BattleBots is incredibly supportive of other teams. Like, even if you're going to fight someone else, going into your fight, you still want them to be like at their, best ability, because it kind of sucks if you go in and you fight someone and then their battery falls out or something silly like that, that's really unfortunate. So everyone really tries to help each other out, which is really wonderful because it makes the fights better. And I don't know. I lost my point.
It does, I mean, that's kind of how I've always seen it. You want both robots to be the best version of themselves that they can be, because that makes for the best fight. Like, that if you won, you won well, you beat a good robot. So and another thing too, and I was curious about that because I know that you mentioned that the tire in the Lucky fight was kind of a consequence of the Tombstone fight. Did that have anything to do with the tire coming off in the Witch Doctor fight as well, or was that just
those are separate? So in the Witch Doctor fight, they just flayed our tire. they caught it, and it pulled the tire off the wheel. And then from then on, that was it. And that maybe could have been better if we'd used a little better adhesive or something, but it just taught us, like, those tires are not going to be good against the type of vertical spinner that Witch Doctor has. And we kind of knew that. It was the same deal with Hypershock. Both of those robots have these kind of double disc setups that are very sharp, but also have a ton of bite, and they can just like tear hunks out of plastic and rubber. Meanwhile, if you have like a drum or a disc that isn't getting as much bite, that's less likely to happen. On the Lucky side of things, they completely sniped that shaft in just the perfect way, where it was a hardened shaft, and a hardened shaft rather than a unhardened or annealed shaft. If you use it as an axle, a hardened shaft is going to snap, which is what happened. It just broke off entirely, and that was the end. Going forward for robots like that, and maybe in general, using an unhardened shaft or an annealed shaft that will bend a little bit, and maybe it drives a little wonky, but at least it still drives. That's something to do different next time, or just use a shaft that's twice as big so it never snaps. But it's the kind of thing that you only get after a bunch of fights, and we've been pretty lucky in that Mammoth had never really been hit in that way before, in that angle, in that direction, and now we know, and now we can do something different.
Yeah, always have to keep improving. I mean, I know still at this point, I don't think that there's any news on next season yet as far as when that's going to happen. What does your preparation look at this point, without having any concrete knowledge of what that's going to look like?
Well, they're trying, and there are rumors bubbling about and things. And there's a few other, we'd like to have Mammoth be available to do some other exhibitions and fights outside of BattleBots as well. So we are, let's see, I can't really give a percentage, but we're chugging through the redesign for Mammoth for next year, taking all those learnings that we were trying to get done from that we wish we'd had in 2021 and put them into the following season. Let's see, what else? Yeah, just basically trying to fix everything that was broken and do a couple of, there's a couple of exciting, what we think are big changes that we think people are going to like. One thing I can say is Mammoth is, it didn't feel right having a sub 6 foot Mammoth. So we decided that had to change and go back to a proper like 6 foot, 6'1" robot. But other than that, just trying to make the robot bulletproof, trying to make it hit harder, and trying to figure out how we're going to move forward now that they've got that sneeze guard, some of the folks are calling it, but now that they've gotten rid of the ring out area around the arena that was our previous win condition, that was what we were trying to do. They've gotten rid of that, so we have to either hit a lot harder or come up with a new way to hit people.
Are we ever going to see tusks on Mammoth? I'm envisioning flipping a robot up into the air and impaling it on the tusks.
Well, we had tusks in 2019 and 2020.
Yeah. Year one Mammoth was honestly quite different, and I feel like it was more focused on being mammothy than the animal. Because we did have tusks, and we also had the plows, which we've done away with completely.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, because did we always run the tusks in 2019? I can't remember. I think we did.
In 2019, we had one fight where we ran the plows against Gemini.
Right. So then we didn't use the tusks.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we always had these like little white tusks on the front, and that also helped us balance a little bit. We've never, I mean, we could have like articulated tusks, but that's that's a lot more gears and motors and things.
Yeah. Lockjaw style articulated tusks. If we have the weight, if we can figure it out, one of our configurations for 2022 should have some tusks. So
okay, yeah, and I should have specified again because I knew that you had them before, but not like this last year you didn't have them. So yeah, it goes back to the whole personality thing. It's just, it's fun, and I think it's fun to think of like different ways that you could utilize something like that. So yeah, I wanted to ask a question too, because I know that you had mentioned that, by this point Mammoth has bought half of the bots out there. Are there any robots that Mammoth has not bought that it would be on your wish list of like, I would really love this matchup?
What you think? We were supposed to have a fight against Rusty this year. They got canceled, and I think that would be pretty entertaining.
I don't want to fight Rusty. I don't feel good about fighting Rusty.
No, I mean,
I love Rusty. It's like, honestly, it's like beating up with your little brother. It doesn't feel right. You love him. I mean, I don't have a little brother, but personally, I would not beat up my little brother. And I think Rusty is adorable. And I just want him to be happy and healthy and live his best life. So I don't want to fight Rusty, but I'll fight anyone else.
All right.
I'll fight Glitch.
Glitch would be fun.
Glitch would be fun.
Because we, taken their spot. So there's some, they could play up the TV drama for that a little bit. Let's see.
Tantrum?
I don't want to fight Tantrum.
I like that.
I'd love there's a lot of robots that I'd love another shot against. I'd really love to beat Shatter.
I was gonna say Shatter next, yeah.
Let's see though. Oh yes, Lockjaw. No, that's perfect. Yeah, I would love,
right?
I'd love to fight Lockjaw. That would be really fun because I want to say my freshman year, the first year at BattleBots in 2019 when we got to do the exhibition fight against Nightmare, like that was a childhood dream. Come true, stamp it, and just put it in the archives. And Donald is another legend of the sport, and it would be awesome to go and fight him and see how it works out. And he has been very supportive of Mammoth also, so it would be cool to get in the ring with him.
It's always great to fight your heroes.
Yeah, right.
For sure. I was actually just thinking to myself because I was curious, of like robots that I'm like would be an interesting matchup, and one of those would be Hydra, who famously used a very interesting configuration against Huge. I'm just curious how you would think a fight would go against a very tight, compact flipper like that, who is really hard to get under.
Well, I think that's where our 2022 plans will come in handy. And that's all I can really say on that. You know who else would be really fun? Sorry to jump back a moment.
Oh no, go right ahead.
Ghost Raptor would be awesome. Especially since they've got a saber-toothed tiger kind of looking logo. That would be really cool.
That'd be fun, yeah.
But yeah, I think Hydra or Blip, both of them would be really tough fights, but at the same time are the kind of thing that I want to experiment with, this coming year.
Right, because until you do it, until you have that matchup, I mean, you can prepare, but you don't necessarily know for sure how your robot's going to perform until you do it. So that would be really interesting.
I know the Hydra folks have said a couple times, like, can we fight Mammoth? We'd like to hit the ceiling. Because if you're going to pick a robot to hit the ceiling with, we're like halfway there already. So
I'm sure who is ever in charge of preparing the battle box is like, please don't do this today. I don't get paid enough. Because that's got to be a pain to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine we get stuck up there.
They would not be happy.
They would not be happy.
They were not happy when Hypershock blew up our batteries. That took a while.
We were on fire for like 2 hours.
It was so bad.
For 2 hours.
They have to get the tube out and they have to suck out all the fumes. And then, the safety guys come in and, they cover your robot with fire tarp. And it's a whole thing.
There was just this massive cloud, like,
so bad.
Outside. They take you outside after the fire goes down enough that they can take you outside. And then they just leave you till the fire can be handled somehow. And in our case, it's in a big metal box that you can't easily get to. So they're just like, well, we're going to let it burn.
Yeah.
So it just burned and burned and burned and burned. Meanwhile, we're sitting outside and the fans are still going. That's pulling all the smoke out of the inside of the arena. And that's coming out right next to where we are sitting with our robot outside that's also on fire. So
you just see these clouds in the sky at night. Because this happened it was late. It was one of the last fights of the day. But
yeah.
There were a couple more. So they still had to get all the fumes out before they could have the next fight. Because, you got to go in there and put your robot in the battle box. You can't just have it full of lithium fumes.
No, they put all the lithium fumes in me.
They did.
Yeah.
We're all going to.
Lungs are great air filters. They're terrible for us to use as air filters, but they will take stuff out of the air real fast.
And that's what, I think, for fans that have never been to the actual taping of BattleBots, I think that's what you miss is it sounds like a long day.
It's really grueling. We tried not to do a full length day, right? You're there for
8 a.m. until midnight.
Yeah, basically.
If you're putting in the hours. We've definitely done days where it's 8 a.m. till midnight, and a guy comes through and he's like, "Everyone has to leave. Go home."
So we try not to do a lot of those back to back, but there's no days where you're there unless you have unless you have a day off or it's a dark day and you just happen to not have any problems. You're there at least 10 hours every day.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're there, like she said, sometimes you're there 16 hours or 17 hours. And then you're greasy and everything, you got to go home. So it is grueling, tiring work, but it's also a lot of fun. And it's the only place that we get to go and fight giant robots against each other. So.
Exactly. That's the best part. And then I guess my last question is, because I asked this to all the teams just to get perspective because it was such a big thing to talk about after last season. I know that the BattleBots folks are looking at, what to change for next year in terms of rules, in terms of, are they going to keep the upper deck? Will they keep it the way that it is? What do you think about all of that? Is there anything that you would really like to see change for the next season?
No more deck. I want the deck.
She's team no deck.
It takes up so much room.
Yeah.
The first time someone got someone on the deck, it was very exciting, very thrilling, and we're all like, "Oh, we're done with it." Just like I don't like the deck. I don't like the deck.
I'm okay with the idea of having a deck. I don't like it jutting out into the arena. I think a lot of people have said put it into the corners or something like that. I that would be fine. I really not just for the sake of Mammoth, but for the sake of all the different flippers and control robots, I really do want to see a designated ring out area of some kind in the arena. So bringing something like that back, like if the deck is going to stay there, if it's half sized and it has real walls on it instead of, being able to just drive off. If you can just drive off, then there's not a lot of point in having the deck there.
You know what I would say we could get rid of the deck. What about more hazards? I would like that.
I'd be into that. Yeah, I would be into some hazards that are brought up to the spec of 2022 2023 battle bots. Because if we can, I don't know, if you've got robots like Hydra throwing people however many feet in the air, and you've got robots like Tombstone like slicing competitors in half practically, a couple of hazards like that, maybe they're harder to get to. Maybe those are on the upper deck.
Ooh, where the upper deck is just like danger zone.
Yeah,
it's just like a shredder.
If you're up there, yeah,
you're mangled. You're gone.
That would be fun. That would be fun. If the whole upper deck was almost an insta kill, like giant spitting blades of doom.
What if there's a pit instead of a deck? There's a pit. How about that?
I think Robot Wars stamped that with a big old copyright.
Well, what do I know?
How about a cave?
Open that.
Cave of Horrors.
I don't think are there bats in it?
Probably.
All right, great. I'm in.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Robot bats or real bats?
Is Boltergeist a bat? Is that part of
No, but I think if you watch their interview, I think that they go into more detail of what their robot actually is, but it is not a bat.
Okay, they have a bat aesthetic. The bats would go with their aesthetic. Is what I'm trying to say.
It's a very spooky aesthetic.
Okay, yeah. It's a good looking robot. I've seen the renders. I just I wasn't sure if there was a specific animal.
There is
inspiration. Okay, all right. We'll go back and take a look. Sorry, Poltergeist guys. I should know that. But
I'm sure I know for sure that they will watch this. So, but yeah. So thank you again for coming on.
Sure.
I mean, I think Mammoth is such an exciting robot. I am so curious to see what happens next season. We'll see how that goes. But any last words before we wrap it up?
No, I mean thanks to all the fans for still being energetic about Mammoth this season. And we really think you're gonna like what we have for you next year.
Very exciting.
You said it all.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time for another episode.
See you next time.
Bye.